Tonight, on Case Files, high along the jagged peaks of Idaho's Sawtooth Ridge, seasoned hunter Fred Jones thought he knew every shadow the forest could cast. A black, massive winged shape swept overhead, too big for an eagle, too silent for a plane. With his bow in hand and heart pounding, he took aim, but did he let the arrow fly? Lastly, April 1999, Point Defiance, Washington. A family outing to a scenic cliffside lookout took a shocking turn when a massive winged creature soared into view. At first, they assumed it was a large eagle, but as it drew closer, the truth became harder to ignore. What they saw, they claimed, was no bird, but a living pterosaur. Two amazing encounters, each leaving the individual baffled and full of questions. The skeptics say they were cases of misidentification. However, the witnesses strongly disagree. They say pterosaurs, aka ropens, are still roaming our North American skies. Join us for these fascinating stories, and perhaps you too will believe.
November in the Idaho backcountry carried a cold clarity with the kind of air that snapped at your lungs and made the pine needles shimmer under a weak midday sun. Fred Jones moved quietly along a deer trail carved into the eastern slope of Sawtooth Ridge. Bow in hand, boots pressing into the frost-crisp ground. He was alone. As always, taking in the crisp mountain silence, broken only by the distant caws of birds and the occasional creak of trees swaying in the wind. This was Fred's country. He'd hunted elk and deer in these mountains for over 20 years. But today, something felt off. Then the forest went quiet. Not just still, dead quiet. The kind of hush that makes your skin prickle. Fred's breath clouded in the cold air as he glanced around. Even the birds had stopped. And then, the shadow came.
My name is Fred Jones. I have been an avid bow hunter for most of my life. I've hunted the Sawtooth Range for years, but seeing this it makes you question what you have been taught. I was heading back to my truck when I came to a clearing, saw a big shadow pass over me. I figured it was just a regular bird. But when I looked up, it was way too big to be any bird I've ever seen. My heart must have skipped a beat because I realized I was looking at a dinosaur bird. Thinking back, this was probably the worst thing I could have done. I started waving my hands in the air and screaming to try and get its attention. That's when it turned its head and looked right at me. I had the feeling this thing wanted to attack, but it was waiting for me to make the first move. I was ready to shoot that pterodactyl, but then I thought, what if it's the last one? So I didn't. I couldn't believe what I had just witnessed, as if I had stepped into another time. To my shock, I did see it again on a separate hunting trip. This time it flew over my truck. You never forget something like that. It stays with you for life. I later contacted the Ropen Network, spoke with Jacob about my sightings. To my amazement, there were many others around the country with similar experiences. I feel privileged to have witnessed that pterodactyl, but also grateful to be alive too.
Fred stood in the clearing long after it was gone, his breath shaking, bow still drawn. The forest slowly returned to life around him, birds calling, wind rustling the brush, but Fred had changed. He'd come into these woods to find elk, maybe fill his freezer for the winter. What he found was something else entirely. He never told the game warden, didn't bother with photos. He hadn't even thought to lift his phone. He told a few close friends, and eventually, someone convinced him to speak publicly. Skeptics laughed, others didn't. And somewhere above Sawtooth Ridge, under a November sky, a shadow may still glide.
The RRN Ropen Radio Network is brought to you by 511 Tactical. Always be ready.
Due to health complications, Fred was unable to provide a one-on-one in-person testimony. However, you can hear some of his statement in our episode titled Point Defiance. Fred described leathery wings, a long form, and an expression on his face that unsettled him, like the look of disdain of an ancient awareness. Fred raised his bow, ready to shoot, but something stopped him. For a moment, man and beast locked eyes before the creature veered off and vanished into the sky. Fred believes what he saw was a pterosaur, something that shouldn't exist. In the remote wilds of Idaho, could a prehistoric still be lurking, hidden from modern science? What do you think?
The journey begins at Point Robinson's lighthouse. Its white tower standing watch over the Puget Sound, weathered by time and salt air. Just beyond, driftwood lies scattered along quiet shores, each piece a story shaped by tide and storm. Along the coastline, the island begins to reveal its wild charm. Sea lion pups lounge on sun-warmed rocks, their sleek bodies glistening, while seagulls wheel overhead, their sharp cries carried on the wind. The air is alive with the rhythm of the sea and the calls of its creatures. In the heart of town, local shops offer handmade gifts, and friendly faces greet you with that unmistakable island warmth. Then comes the familiar hum of the ferry boat crossing the sound. Vashon lives in its art. You'll find music on porches, dancing under open skies. Visitors gather by the shore to watch the rowboats glide, graceful and slow. Just across the water from Vashon, the waters near Point Defiance stir with something ancient. Orcas, black and white and majestic, glide through the Salish Sea during their seasonal migrations. For generations, these whales have passed by this peninsula. A short walk inland brings you to the beloved Point Defiance Zoo and Aquarium, where conservation meets curiosity. Children press their hands to the glass, wide-eyed at sharks and sea otters. Outside, Sumatran tigers move with silent grace. But there is something else that could reside along the shorelines of Point Defiance. Something far more ancient. Something that has evaded time itself. And it is here where our next encounter begins. It was a clear and sunny day in the Pacific Northwest. The skies over Puget Sound were cloudless, the water calm and glittering. Catherine Fuller and her ex-husband were out for a drive with their 2 young sons, looking to enjoy the views from one of the lookouts near Point Defiance. Point Defiance is a place of peace. Moss-covered trees, coastal wind, and trails that wind deeper than most ever walk. But sometimes, if you're looking the right way at just the right moment, you see something else. On the shore, families skip rocks, play tag with the tide, build castles they know will wash away. Catherine Fuller wasn't thinking about legends or creatures when they drove into the park that afternoon. Just a Saturday drive with her boys. Sunroof open, smiles in the mirror. Her ex-husband sat beside her. There's history here, yes. Soldiers, stories, tribes that named these lands long before maps. But today isn't about history. It's about now. The evening sun brought with it a sense of calm. But that calm would soon change. Something ancient was about to make an appearance. From where? No one knows for certain. Catherine Fuller was interviewed by the Ropen Network in 2024. She has this to say.
We just stood there looking out over the Puget Sound, and Vashon Island is directly across from us. And I saw something I didn't know what it was in the sky. But I said, "Look, honey, there's an eagle." And my husband said, "That's not an eagle." And we just kept watching it and watching it and watching it. It got closer and closer and closer. And the first thing I noticed about it was that it had this bony crest coming out of the back of its head, which is not normal for things that I normally see in the sky flying. And the closer it got, I saw more and more details. And I said to my husband, "What is that?" And he said,
"I don't know."
And I said, "It's a pterodactyl." He said,
It can't be. They're extinct.
and I said, "Honey, we're looking at one." And then both of us were just kind of transfixed and mesmerized. It didn't move a muscle. And this thing came flying crossed in front of us, and at one point, the closest it was to us was about 13 feet away in the sky right in front of us. And I got to see every detail of this thing. And it landed about, I want to say about 37 feet to my left on the same cliff. I didn't see it land, but I heard it land in the brush. And it sounded like a big hand glider covering and landing on brush, undergrowth under the trees. And my husband turned to me and he said, "Get the boys in the car." And I got the boys in the car. And as we were leaving, I said, "We've got to tell somebody about this. We have to." We were at the zoo. They probably had tranquilizers or nets or something that they could contain it with. And I was worried that, there's a lot of people there. There's a beach, there's, a zoo, there's an aquarium. And this thing was very big. The wingspan was about 35 feet.
35.
In length, yeah. From the tip of one side of the wing to the other was 35 feet. And the bony crest was, it was more than half and less than 3/4 the length of the beak, I remember. And I want to say 5/8 of the size of the beak. I kind of was a little bit wigged out by looking at its eye, so I didn't look at it for very long, but there was no feathers, no fur, which I thought was kind of interesting because I thought it was going to be like a bat, because it was like a bat in many ways. And then the body itself, definitely noticed that it didn't have any feathers, but when it got really close, I kept looking at the tummy part of it, and it didn't have any fur. It was the same skin that was in between the wings that was on the body.
Catherine, though shaken, couldn't stop thinking about what they had seen. It had been real. The features were burned into her memory. The leathery wings, the pointed head, the effortless ancient glide. She would later come forward with her account, even agreeing to take a polygraph test, which she passed. Her story never changed. Her conviction never wavered.
Really good hair. Thank you, Sally.
You are welcome.
I knew that's what would happen, and it did.
See the immediate feeling you had in you.
I have confidence in the polygraph now.
Right.
That's good.
Because you must have had a lot of doubters over the years, so to be vindicated.
No, I thought it would either be positive or it would be inconclusive. I wasn't really sure with my own responses, my body responses and everything that she was doing and how they do it. I wasn't sure if it would be inconclusive or if it would say that I was telling the truth. I knew it wouldn't be negative, so I wasn't worried about that part. But
For Catherine Fuller, that day in 1999 shattered the boundary between the natural world and the unexplained. Though only she and her ex-husband had seen it, she knew the truth. Something prehistoric had taken flight over Puget Sound, and she had been there to witness it.
Catherine Fuller's description is not only consistent with known traits of pterosaurs, such as leathery wings and pointed head crest, but her account has remained unchanged for over 2 decades. Despite her ex-husband's initial fear, Catherine stood by what she saw, even submitting and passing a polygraph test. There are no known birds in the Pacific Northwest with a 35-foot wingspan, or the distinctive silhouette of a Pteranodon. And yet, in 1999, something flew from Vashon Island toward Point Defiance that defied all logic. Are these accounts simply misidentifications, or brief windows into a forgotten past? Well, that's for you to decide. For Fred Jones and Catherine Fuller, they believe what they encountered was real. The question now is, do you? Thank you for joining us on this special edition of the Ropen Network. In the meantime, seek the truth. Keep your eyes on the sky. I'm your host, Jacob Guerra. Good night. For every encounter, there is a mystery. And for every mystery, there is someone somewhere who has a missing clue. Perhaps that someone is watching. Perhaps that someone is you.